Rain hammered down on the Orion Motors lot, turning the floodlights into smeared halos of white. Elias Carter, single father and night shift maintenance tech, spotted a luxury sedan dead in a puddle, a woman trapped inside. The security guard stood watching. VIP car, nobody touches it. Elias knelt anyway, pried off the panel, bypassed the shorted circuit, saved the system from total failure. The engine roared back to life. 5 minutes later, he was called upstairs and fired on the spot. The night had started like any other. Elias clocked in at 10, his work boots still damp from the walk across the employee lot. Orion Motors occupied 3 city blocks in the industrial district, chrome and glass rising against the Seattle skyline. The company built luxury sedans and electric vehicles for clients who measured wealth in commas, not zeros. Their newest model, the Orion V, was scheduled to launch in 2 weeks. Revolutionary battery system, 12-minute charge time, integrated electrical architecture, safety features that could predict collisions. Marketing had printed the banners. Investors had written the checks. The automotive press had crowned it Vehicle of the Year. Everything rode on this launch. Stock prices, executive bonuses, the company's future. Orion had bet everything on the Orion V. But there was a problem. Rumors circulated through engineering for months. Random electrical failures. Systems shutting down in wet conditions. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to make the night crew nervous. Technicians whispered about dashboard lights that flickered. Engineers talked about impossible relay failures. The day shift blamed the night shift. The night shift blamed the day shift. And management blamed no one because acknowledging the problem meant delaying the launch. The prototypes lived in a restricted section of the lot, roped off with yellow tape and security cameras. Touch one without authorization and you were gone. The company had fired 3 people in the past year for violating it. No exceptions. No second chances. Elias Carter had touched one anyway. He was 36 years old, lean and weathered, with hands that knew their way around an engine. Once, he had been an engineer, a good one. He had worked on brake systems and load calculations, published papers, trained junior engineers. His wife, Natalie, used to tease him about his seriousness, the way he could spend an hour explaining the physics of friction to executives who just wanted to know if the car would stop. But that was before the diagnosis, before the chemo that did not work, and the experimental treatments that made everything worse. Before the long months in hospital rooms, holding her hand, watching the machines count down the time they had left. He had taken leave, then unpaid leave, then sporadic shifts that became missed deadlines and incomplete projects. The demotion came with a form letter and a reduced salary. Night maintenance, take it or leave it. He took it because he had a daughter to raise and bills that never stopped coming. His personnel file still listed his old credentials. But nobody read personnel files. They just saw the uniform and the late shift and assumed he was where he belonged. He lived with Matilda in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side. She was 7 years old, bright and careful, with her mother's dark hair and her father's habit of fixing broken things. She built contraptions out of cardboard and tape, little machines that spun and clicked and made her smile. She asked questions about everything. How did the toaster know when the bread was done? Why did birds sit on power lines without getting shocked? Could you build a car that ran on lightning every night before bed? She set a dry towel by the front door every morning. Elias found it there, waiting, a small ritual, born from watching him come home soaked too many times. She never said anything. She just left the towel and went to sleep, trusting that her father would be there when she woke up. The trust killed him some days, on the other side of the city, in a penthouse office that overlooked the water. Vivian Ashford was still awake. She was 38, CEO and controlling shareholder of Orion Motors, a woman who had inherited a company and turned it into an empire. Her father, Richard Ashford, had built Orion from nothing, welded the first chassis himself in a Tacoma garage. He died 5 years ago, leaving Vivian with a company, a fortune, and a board of directors who thought she had inherited the title without earning it. She proved them wrong within 6 months, cut unprofitable divisions, renegotiated supplier contracts, pivoted the entire company toward electric vehicles 3 years before the competition realized the market was shifting. She dressed in charcoal and steel, spoke in clipped sentences, and trusted almost no one. Her father had built Orion on handshake deals and gut instinct. Vivian built it on data and contracts and the understanding that loyalty was a currency, not a virtue. She had never married, never wanted to. Relationships required vulnerability, and vulnerability was a liability in a world where every conversation was a negotiation and every smile hid a motive. Tonight, she was testing the Orion Phi herself. No driver, no security detail, just her and the prototype and the rain. She needed to know if the rumors were true, if there was a flaw in the electrical system. She would find it before the launch, before the lawsuits, before the board could use it as an excuse to remove her. So she drove the car into the service lot, cut the engine, and waited. The failure happened fast. Dashboard lights flickered, door locks engaged. The whole system froze, trapping her inside a vehicle that had just become a very expensive cage. She stayed calm. Panicking would not help. Calling for help would alert the wrong people. She sat in the dark, rain drumming on the roof, and thought about who might want her to fail. Clinton Hayes was at the top of that list. He was the chief operating officer, 10 years her senior, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He ran the day-to-day operations, managed the suppliers, controlled the information flow. He wanted her job. More than that, he wanted the company. If the Orion 5 failed, the board would blame Vivian. If Vivian fell, Clinton would rise. It was simple math. And then Elias Carter appeared. He had been doing his rounds, checking the perimeter. When he heard the electrical snap, it was subtle, the kind of sound most people would miss. But Elias had been listening to engines fail for 15 years. He saw the sedan, saw the water pooling near the undercarriage, saw the woman inside sitting perfectly still. The guard, Ronnie Blake, stood nearby with his arms crossed. "That is a prototype," Ronnie said. "You touch it, you are done." "There is water getting into the electrical system," Elias replied. "If it shorts, it could catch fire." Ronnie looked at the car, then at Elias, then back at the car. He was a good man, but he had 3 kids and a mortgage. He shook his head and stepped back. Elias knelt in the rain. He pulled a pocket tool from his belt, a compact multi-tool he had carried since his engineering days, and pried open the access panel beneath the driver's side door. Water had pooled in the recess, turning the electronics bay into a shallow pond. The circuit board was exposed, droplets clinging to the contacts like dew on a spider web. He could see the problem immediately. A relay housing had cracked, allowing moisture to bridge the connection. The system had shorted itself trying to maintain voltage across a circuit that no longer existed. He pulled out his flashlight and examined the damage more closely. The housing should not have cracked. It was industrial-grade polycarbonate, rated for temperature extremes and impact resistance. But this one looked brittle, almost cheap. He touched it with his fingertip and a piece flaked off. Wrong material. Someone had replaced it with something that looked right, but performed wrong. He found a plastic sleeve in his tool kit, the kind used for temporary cable insulation, and wrapped the vulnerable section. Then he bypassed the failed relay entirely, routing power through a redundant circuit that the original engineers had built into the system as a failsafe. It was not elegant, it was not permanent, but it would work long enough to get the car out of the rain and into a proper service bay. The engine turned over. Dash lights flickered on. The locks disengaged with a soft click. Elias stood, water running down his face, and looked through the windshield. The woman inside met his eyes. She did not thank him. She did not smile. She just looked at him with an expression he could not read, as if she were memorizing his face for some purpose he did not yet understand. Then she shifted the car into drive and pulled away. Taillights disappearing into the rain. Elias stood there in the rain, holding a small piece of shielding that had fallen loose during the repair. It was the wrong size, the wrong material. Someone had replaced a factory part with an aftermarket component, something cheap and poorly installed. He pocketed it and walked back toward the maintenance building, water sloshing in his boots. His radio crackled. "Carter, report to security, now!" The office was small and windowless, lit by flickering fluorescents that made everyone look sick. Clinton Hayes was there, along with Bernice Lowell from Human Resources and Ronnie, who would not meet Elias's eyes. The COO stood with his hands in his pockets, relaxed and smiling. "Do you know what you just did?" Clinton asked. "I prevented a potential fire," Elias said. "You tampered with a restricted vehicle without authorization. You violated safety protocols. You exposed the company to liability." Clinton turned to Bernice. "Pull his access card." Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. There was someone inside. "That is not your concern. Your job is to follow procedure. You failed." Clinton's smile widened. "Sign the voluntary resignation form. Make this easy." "I am not signing." "Then we will terminate you for cause. Either way, you are done." Bernice slid a document across the table. Elias did not touch it. He looked at Ronnie, who stared at the floor. He looked at Clinton, who looked back with the expression of a man who had already won. Then he stood, set his access card on the table, and walked out into the rain. The apartment was dark when he got home. Matilda was asleep, her small body curled under a blanket covered in stars. A blanket Natalie had sewn by hand in the last good month. Elias stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, and felt the weight of the night settle on his shoulders. He had done the right thing. He was certain of that. He had prevented a fire, maybe saved a life. But certainty did not pay rent. It did not buy medicine or groceries or keep the lights on. He sat at the kitchen table and pulled out his phone. Bank balance $943. Rent was due in 12 days. $1,400. Matilda's inhaler prescription $168 without insurance. The school lunch fees $37. Electric bill, water bill, internet for homework, groceries. He added the numbers 3 times. They had 3 weeks before the money ran out, 4 weeks before the eviction notice. In the living room. He found the old cardboard box where he kept his past. Engineering certificates, diplomas, letters of commendation, a framed photo from the safety conference in Portland where he had presented a paper on brake system redundancy. Natalie stood next to him in the photo, radiant in a green dress, so proud of him it hurt to look at her face. That had been 8 years ago. A different life. He had been good once. He had built systems that saved lives. He had trained engineers who designed better, safer vehicles. And now he was unemployed, sitting in the dark at 3 a.m, holding a certificate that meant nothing because nobody cared what you used to be. He set the certificates back in the box and closed the lid. Then he pulled up his laptop and started searching for jobs. Maintenance positions at warehouses, night security at office buildings, anything with a paycheck and benefits. Every application asked reason for leaving last position. He typed variations of terminated and let go, watching each one transform his resume from possibility to liability. By dawn, he had submitted 17 applications. He expected 0 responses. Matilda woke at 6. She found him still at the table, the certificates spread out like a hand of cards.
She climbed into the chair next to him and handed him the towel she always left by the door. "You are wet," she said. "I forgot to dry off." "Are you going to work today?" Elias folded the towel and set it aside. "No, I have the day off." "Good. Then you can take me to school." She smiled, and he smiled back, and the lie sat between them like a stone. Across the city. Vivian Ashford sat in her office and read the incident report. Clinton had filed it within an hour of the event. His language careful and precise. A maintenance worker had accessed a restricted vehicle without authorization. The situation had been contained, and personnel action had been taken. No mention of the woman in the car. No mention of the electrical failure. Just a problem solved and filed away. Vivian picked up her phone and called the security desk. "Who was in the prototype last night?" There was a pause. "I do not have that information." "Find it." She hung up and pulled up the employee file for Elias Carter, former mechanical engineer, hired 8 years ago, transferred to maintenance 3 years ago after extended medical leave. Multiple commendations for problem solving, no disciplinary record. Terminated last night for unauthorized access to company property. Something was wrong. Clinton had moved too fast. The termination paperwork had been processed before dawn, the file sealed and archived. That was not standard procedure. That was someone covering tracks. Vivian opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small device. A portable recorder she had installed in the prototype 2 weeks ago. She had suspected sabotage. She had wanted proof. She plugged it into her laptop and listened. The recording was dark and static-filled, but the voices were clear. Elias explaining the problem, Ronnie warning him not to touch the car, the sound of tools and rain and the engine coming back to life, and underneath it all, a timestamp that proved the car had failed on its own. Not because of anything Elias had done. Vivian sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. If Clinton was willing to fire a competent employee to bury a product flaw, then the problem was bigger than one car. It was systemic, and if she moved against him without proof, he would destroy the evidence and blame her for the chaos. She needed Elias Carter, and she needed him alive and angry enough to fight back. Elias spent the morning applying for jobs online. Maintenance positions, warehouse work, anything with a steady paycheck and benefits. Every application asked the same question. Reason for leaving last position. He typed, "Terminated for safety violation," and watched his chances evaporate. At noon, Matilda came home from school. She dropped her backpack by the door and climbed onto the couch next to him. "Did you find a new job?" "Not yet." "That is okay. You are really good at fixing things. Someone will want you." He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. She smelled like crayons and shampoo, like the small and fragile pieces of the world that still made sense. The rent notice sat on the counter. The inhaler prescription sat next to it. In 2 weeks, they would be out of money. In 3, they would be out of time. There was a knock at the door. Elias opened it to find a woman standing in the hallway, holding a black umbrella. She was dressed in a gray suit, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. It took him a moment to place her. The woman from the car. "Elias Carter?" she asked. "Yes." "I am Vivian Ashford." Matilda appeared behind him, curious. "Are you the lady who got stuck in the car?" Vivian looked down at the girl, then back at Elias. "May I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table. Matilda brought Vivian a towel without being asked, the same way she brought one to her father every night. Vivian took it, surprised, and set it carefully on the table. Elias leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. "You saved my life last night," Vivian said. "I did my job, and you were fired for it." "Yes."
Vivian reached into her bag and pulled out the small piece of shielding Elias had pocketed. She set it on the table between them. "You kept this. Why?" "Because it does not belong in that car. Someone replaced a factory part with a cheap aftermarket component. That is not an accident." "No, it is not." Vivian folded her hands. "The Orion V has a design flaw. The electrical system is vulnerable to water intrusion." "But what happened last night was not a flaw. It was sabotage. Someone is creating failures to make the launch look catastrophic." "Clinton Hayes." "I believe so, but I cannot prove it. Not yet." She looked at him, her expression sharp. "I need your help. 48 hours. You examine the prototypes, document the sabotage, testify before the board. In return, I pay you as an independent consultant and clear your record." Elias shook his head. "I have a daughter. I cannot afford to make enemies." "You already have enemies. Clinton will make sure you never work in this industry again unless you fight back." Matilda tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, you should help her. Bad people should not win." Vivian smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. Elias looked at his daughter, then at the woman sitting at his table, then at the rent notice on the counter. He thought about the right thing to do and the safe thing to do and realized they had stopped being the same thing a long time ago. 48 hours, he said. The next morning. Elias returned to Orion Motors with a visitor badge and a camera. Vivian had arranged access to the testing facility, a converted warehouse on the edge of the property. Inside, 3 Orion V prototypes sat under fluorescent lights, their hoods open, their systems exposed. Elias started with the electrical diagrams. Factory specs called for insulated relay covers and sealed junction boxes. What he found were loose connections, exposed wiring, and components that looked like they had been installed by someone in a hurry. He photographed everything: serial numbers, part stamps, installation dates that did not match the maintenance logs. By noon, he had proof, not just of poor workmanship, but of deliberate tampering. Someone had systematically weakened the electrical systems in all 3 prototypes. Someone who had access to the facility. Someone who knew exactly where to cut corners without triggering an immediate failure. He found Vivian in her office, standing at the window, watching the rain. She turned when he entered, and he handed her the camera. "It is worse than you thought," he said. "All 3 prototypes have been compromised. If any of them had launched, people would have died." Vivian scrolled through the photos, her expression growing colder with each image. "Clinton has been pushing for an early launch. He wants the Orion V on the road before the board meeting next week. Why? Because if the launch is successful, he gets a promotion and a seat on the board. If it fails after the launch, I take the blame and he takes my job." She set the camera down. "We need to stop him, publicly, in front of the board." Elias hesitated. "If you accuse him without absolute proof, he will bury us both. Then we get absolute proof." She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Ronnie, it is Vivian Ashford. I need you in my office. Now." Ronnie Blake arrived 20 minutes later, still in his security uniform, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Vivian gestured to a chair. He sat. "You were there the night Elias Carter was fired," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me what happened." Ronnie swallowed. "I was told not to let anyone near the prototypes. When Mr. Carter approached the car, I warned him. But he said there was a safety risk. He fixed it anyway. And then, Mr. Hayes called me into his office. He had me sign a statement saying Mr. Carter had violated protocol. He said if I did not sign, I would be terminated for failing to stop him." "Did you see anyone else near the prototypes that night, before Elias arrived?" Ronnie looked down at his hands. His voice dropped. "Yes, ma'am. About an hour before. Someone was in the restricted area with a tool bag. I thought they had authorization, so I did not stop them. Who was it? I do not know. The cameras were offline. They have been offline for 3 weeks. Vivian leaned forward. Offline for 3 weeks, and no one reported it. Mr. Hayes said it was scheduled maintenance. Elias felt the pieces click into place. Disabled cameras, unauthorized access, components swapped out under the cover of routine maintenance. Clinton had not just sabotaged the cars, he had built a system to ensure no one could prove it. You are going to testify, Vivian said to Ronnie. At the board meeting, you are going to tell them everything you just told me. Ronnie paled. Ma'am, if I do that, I will lose my job. If you do not, someone will lose their life. What matters more? Ronnie looked at Elias, then back at Vivian. He took a breath. I will do it. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Vivian spent 2 days preparing her case, assembling documents and photographs and testimony into a presentation that left no room for doubt. Elias spent those same 2 days at home with Matilda, watching the clock and wondering if doing the right thing was about to ruin his life again. On Thursday night, Matilda asked him where he was going the next day. I have to go to a meeting, he said. Is it scary? A little. Will you be okay? He knelt down so they were eye level. I will be fine, I promise. She wrapped her arms around his neck. You are the best, Dad, even when things are hard. He held her, memorizing the weight of her and the sound of her breathing, and thought about all the things he wanted to say, but the words were too big and she was too young, so he just kissed her forehead and told her he loved her. The boardroom was on the top floor, glass walls overlooking the city, a long mahogany table surrounded by men and women in expensive suits who made decisions that moved markets. Clinton Hayes sat at one end, confident and composed. Vivian sat at the other, a laptop open. Elias stood near the door, next to Ronnie Blake, both aware they were the wrong people in the wrong room. The chairman, Gerard Thornton, called the meeting to order, 72, a veteran of 4 decades in automotive manufacturing. We are here to discuss the Orion 5 launch schedule. Mr. Hayes, you have requested an accelerated timeline. Please present your case. Clinton stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He smiled at the room. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Orion 5 represents the future of this company. We have invested $87 million in development. We have pre-orders from dealerships in 32 states. Our competitors are 6 months behind us. If we launch now, we own the market. If we delay, we lose everything. He clicked through a presentation, sales projections, market analysis, customer testimonials. Every day we wait costs us $200,000. I propose we move the launch date up by 1 week. Murmurs around the table, heads nodding. The logic was sound. Ms. Ashford, Gerard asked. Your thoughts? Vivian stood. She did not smile. The Orion 5 is not ready to launch. It has a critical safety flaw in the electrical system, and the man responsible for concealing that flaw is sitting at this table. Silence, the kind that follows a gunshot. Clinton's smile did not waver. That is a very serious accusation, Vivian. It is a very serious crime. Clinton. Vivian opened her laptop and connected it to the display. Over the past 3 months, someone has been systematically sabotaging the Orion 5 prototypes. They disabled security cameras. They replaced factory-certified components with cheap aftermarket parts. They created conditions that would guarantee catastrophic failures after launch. She pulled up the first photograph. Circuit board, wiring exposed, insulation stripped. These images were taken 3 days ago by Elias Carter, a former mechanical engineer who was terminated for fixing one of these vehicles when it failed in the rain. Mr. Carter, please explain what you found. Elias stepped forward. All 3 prototypes have compromised electrical systems. The relay housings are made from substandard materials that crack under thermal stress. The junction boxes are not properly sealed. The wiring insulation has been deliberately weakened. Any of these vehicles could experience total electrical failure in wet conditions. That means no power steering, no brakes, no lights, at highway speeds. That is a death sentence. Patricia Chen, a board member, leaned forward. How can you be certain this is sabotage and not a design flaw? Because I examined the original specifications. The factory parts are rated for extreme conditions. What I found would barely pass inspection for a golf cart. Someone swapped them out. Someone who had access. Clinton stood. This is absurd. Mr. Carter was fired for violating safety protocols. He broke into a restricted area. Now he is trying to discredit this company because he is angry. This is revenge, not evidence. Then explain the security cameras, Vivian said. You authorized an emergency shutdown of all camera systems in the prototype testing area for 3 weeks, with no work order, no IT oversight. The cameras were being upgraded, standard procedure. For 3 weeks, Vivian pulled up another document. I reviewed the IT logs. There was no scheduled camera maintenance, no replacement hardware ordered, no technicians assigned. You shut down those cameras using an executive override, and you did it the same day the first component failure was reported. Gerard frowned. Mr. Hayes, did you authorize the camera shutdown? I did, for security reasons. There had been reports of unauthorized personnel. By turning off the cameras, Patricia asked. That makes no sense. Then where is the work order? Vivian asked. Where is the invoice? Where is the installation report? Empty fields. No documentation. There is no record of any camera upgrade. You shut them down so you could sabotage the vehicles without being recorded. Clinton's jaw tightened. You are grasping at straws. Am I? Vivian turned to Ronnie. Mr. Blake, you were on duty the evening before the first prototype failure. Please tell the board what you witnessed. Ronnie stepped forward, trembling slightly. I saw someone in the restricted area at approximately 2:15 in the morning. They had a tool bag and were working under one of the prototypes. I assumed they had authorization. The cameras were offline. Did you report this? Gerard asked. Yes, sir. I filed a report with Mr. Hayes the next morning. And what did Mr. Hayes tell you? He told me the person was an authorized technician working on a confidential project. He told me not to mention it to anyone. He said it was sensitive corporate information. Do you have a copy of that report? I did, but it was removed from the system 2 days later. Mr. Hayes said it had been filed in error. The room erupted, Gerard pounding the table for order. Enough, Gerard said. Ms. Ashford, do you have any additional evidence? I do. Vivian pulled up financial documents, highlighted transactions, wire transfers. Over the past 6 months, Clinton has been receiving payments from Next Wave Automotive, small amounts, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, buried in consulting fees. Next Wave is owned by our largest competitor, the same competitor who would benefit most if the Orion 5 launch failed spectacularly. Clinton slammed his hand on the table. That is privileged consulting work, completely legal. You advised our competitor, Vivian said. The same competitor whose sales team has been telling dealers that the Orion 5 has electrical problems. You did not just sabotage our vehicles. Clinton, you sold us out. Patricia Chen looked at Clinton with disgust. Gerard Thornton closed his portfolio and folded his hands. Mr. Hayes, I think you should leave. This is a witch hunt, Clinton said. You have no proof. I have photographs, I have maintenance logs, I have financial records, I have testimony, and I have this. Vivian pulled out a small audio recorder and set it on the table.
This is a recording from the prototype that failed the night Mr. Carter was fired. It captures someone accessing the vehicle when no authorized personnel were scheduled to be there. She pressed play. Static, rain, footsteps, metal scraping, a muffled voice. I had that recording analyzed by a forensic audio specialist. The voice is yours. Clinton, you were there.
You sabotaged that car. And when Mr. Carter fixed it and exposed your plan, you fired him to cover your tracks.
Gerard's voice was cold. Security. Please escort Mr. Hayes from the building, as of this moment. He is suspended pending a full investigation. By Monday, Clinton Hayes was gone. Not just fired, investigated. The company's legal team had turned over every document, every email, every access log. They found evidence of bid rigging, falsified safety reports, payments to suppliers who delivered substandard parts. The Orion V sabotage was just the beginning. Clinton had been bleeding the company for years, hiding the damage behind paperwork and intimidation. Vivian stood in the main production facility, addressing the entire company. We failed, not because our products were flawed, but because our culture allowed someone to prioritize personal gain over safety. That ends today. Effective immediately. We are implementing an anonymous safety reporting system. Any employee can flag a concern without fear of retaliation. We are also establishing a whistleblower protection fund and an independent safety review board. She paused, looking out at the crowd. And we are establishing the Natalie Carter Memorial Scholarship, named after the woman who should still be here. It will support children of employees pursuing careers in engineering and safety, because the people who build these cars matter as much as the cars themselves. Elias stood in the back of the room, listening. Natalie's name, spoken aloud in a place that had tried to erase him. It was not justice. Justice would have brought her back, but it was acknowledgement. It was memory given weight. After the meeting, Vivian found him in the hallway. The board reinstated you, full back pay, full benefits, and a new position, senior safety engineer if you want it. I want it. Good, because we have a lot of work to do. They walked through the facility together, past the assembly lines and the testing bays and the restricted lot where the Orion V prototypes still sat, waiting. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing, and for the first time in years, Elias felt like he could breathe. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Vivian Ashford walked into Matilda Carter's elementary school. She was there for Career Day, a last-minute addition to the schedule. She stood in front of 27 second graders and talked about building cars and solving problems and why it mattered to do the right thing even when it was hard. Matilda sat in the front row, beaming after the presentation. Vivian knelt down next to her. "Your dad is a good man." "I know," Matilda said. "He fixes things, even when nobody is watching." "That is the best kind of person." That night, Elias picked Matilda up from school and they walked home together, her small hand in his. The rent was paid, the inhaler was refilled. The school lunch account was current. They stopped at the park, and she ran to the swings, her laughter cutting through the evening air. Elias stood and watched, his hands in his pockets, his heart full. The rain came back, light and soft, washing the city clean. And for the first time in a long time, the rain felt like a beginning instead of an ending.